family. We should be good now. We ain't use that short break sign in a minute because it is all out of order. Okay, I need to check to see if that echo was there too. Literally, where you at? You five. You supposed to be helping me out with my sound qualities. Would you take me away? Would you take me away? What a difference a day makes. All right, family, are we good? Echoes. Nope, we in business. There we go. Now we can actually get this party started. So, I hope this is not your first time here, but if it is, this is Soul Swami Live, and this is our Thursday night book club. What we do here is we discuss all things healing in various forms or so forth. Well, at least, yeah, on Soul Swami channel, that's what we do. We discuss all things healing. Thursday night is a spinoff of our Tuesday night show that's supremely focused on healing. And if you'd like to catch that, we're working on the quantum shift. But essentially, the quantum shift is the embodiment of the energy that you would like to become. So we're working on that on Tuesdays. But this is a spinoff of our Tuesday show to allow us to reconnect to the child in us by having yours truly read to you. You can catch us every Tuesday and Thursday. We are on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, but we are on all social media platforms. But for the most part, if you want to see the live show, it's Twitch, YouTube, and Facebox, right? So generally at the beginning of every show, we do a chakra cleansing. If you weren't here on Tuesday, then you may not be aware, but we are on our third eye. The color for your third eye is indigo. Indigo is such a hard color. To create with lighting. So if you are into light therapy or color therapy, whether it be the foods you eat, clothes you wear, things you interact with, light therapy or color therapy, the color is indigo. The element for that is light. So if you are into that, if you're into stones, it's labradorite, amethyst, which I love. I got that a little bit of everywhere. Partially I'm biased too because I'm a Pisces. So our birthstone is amethyst. I'm biased. I'm an amethyst guy. Yeah, I got all colors sitting around here. Purple fluorite works good, and what's that say? Sodalite. If you are into aromatherapy, you want to think rosemary, cedarwood, patchouli. And if you are curious on what the third eye generally is in control of, it is your intuition, your vision, not your physical vision, your 2020 or whatever it is, but your vision, your forethought in planning your vision. And it is good for your perception. So if your third eye is off, your perception can be a little bit off. Your intuition can be a little bit off. And it's good for astral travel, astral projection, which you may not know much about, but is essentially putting your consciousness into another time or place. which we do all the time with memories. We astral project with memories. We can have some memories that when we think about it, it's almost like we're still living in that moment. So at the start of the show, if you don't know, we're reading. What are we reading, family? Makes Me Wanna Holla. So we generally start off with a little sound bowl. I do got my ukulele up here, but I don't know if I'm gonna mess with the ukulele today. But we start with a bowl. So this is the chakra cleansing part where you just kind of relax and try to clear your mind of the stresses of the earlier the day, of the week, and just really focus on yourself and your health and your well-being and anything that necessarily comes to mind. So we start with our big sound bowl. I did bring out my steel drum today too, so my spirit called for it. So we are definitely trying to do a little better at trusting to ourselves and listening to our spirit and respecting the things that our spirit wants, because Our spirit needs those things. And not allowing our ego to take the driver's seat so much, because the ego does not care what the spirit needs. The ego has a very different function than your spirit. So you got to really, really, really take time and practice. So today we will do like we did on Tuesday, and we are going to combine the breath work with the visualization. We are going to do the sun moon cleansing. If you're not familiar with the sun moon cleansing, it is you envision the sun or the moon, but in our case, we choose any color light in a circular shape, and we envision it in our crown area above our head, and with every breath, we bring it down to every energy point, allowing it to clean, rejuvenate, discard old, and replace with new energies. So during this period, all you really have to do is just relax, focus on your breathing, and listen to the sound of my voice. So you start and close your eyes and envision a light right there above your head in your crown area. And as you feel that light right there, you feel it clearing out the fog, bringing light to the dark areas of your mind. And as it shines that light, you feel clarity, direction. You feel clearer in thought and your thought processes. And you take a deep breath, then release. And as you breathe in, you bring that down to your third eye. And as the light resides in your third eye, you feel it cleansing, renewing, giving you a vision, giving you your trust and your intuition, giving you perspectives beyond those you already carry. And you take a deep breath in and bring the light down to your throat and then release. And as light sits in your throat, you feel it giving you confidence to communicate the things you need, the truths that you know, and the voice that you have to create, change, and shape. It's giving you the confidence to use that voice. And you breathe in. Take that deep breath and bring the light down to your heart. And release. As the light resides in your heart, you feel love. As the fear goes away, you feel worthy to give and receive love. You feel loved by the decisions you make, the choices you make, the directions you go, the things you do to affirm yourself. And you take a deep breath and bring that light down to your solar plexus. And as the light resides in your solar plexus, you feel stability in your emotions. You feel equipped with the tools to navigate these emotions. You feel a sense of peace because you understand that you are equipped to navigate, express, receive, and share your emotions. And then you take a deep breath and bring that light down to your sacral and release. And as the light resides in your sacral, you feel a renewed vigor for your passions. You connect the things that give you joy to your health and well-being. You feel control. You feel adequate. You understand that you are in control of these things, and you breathe in. And as you breathe in, you bring that light down to your root chakra and release. And as the light resides in your root chakra, you feel grounded, you feel connected, you feel like you now have direction. Now you breathe, take a deep breath and breathe in. Bring that light up to your sacral and release. Take a deep breath and breathe in. Bring that light up to your solar plexus and release. Take a deep breath, breathe in, bring the light up to your heart and release. Take a deep breath, breathe in, bring the light up to your throat and release. Take a deep breath, breathe in, bring the light up to your third eye, your intuition, and release. Take a deep breath in, bring the light up to your crown and your thoughts, and release. As the light resides in your crown, I want you to repeat these affirmations after me. I trust my intuition. My imagination is powerful. I think clearly. My third eye sees all. I trust my intuition. My imagination is powerful. I think clearly, and my third eye sees all. All right, family. I hope that lets you get grounded and connected to what we're about to do. Relax a little bit, so now you can sit back and ooh, excuse me, that was rude. No home training. I'm trying to get me some space, man. You dig? I don't feel like sitting that way. I don't even know where we are in the story. I know he was talking about dating, which was interesting. I gotta see where we at. What's happening? We know he's out of jail. He finally started dating. He got that baby on the way. Right when he was getting ready to leave and go to wherever, Atlanta, Wisconsin, somewhere in Wisconsin. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that he got a baby on the way. He taking his girl to Atlanta with him, even though he ain't want to do it. And he's thinking about all those sundown towns that he traveled to do his journalism activities and processing on if he should get a gun, but he decides not to. Pew pew, whatever. He decides not to because his concerns of how he might use it, and he's used them before, so that's a real concern he can have. He's definitely used them before on people. Like most newcomers at the Journal Constitution, I was broken in on evening shifts, 3 p.m. to midnight, or sometimes 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. It helped me learn the city. Most nights, I listened for the action on the police scanner, often dashing from the office to get a company car and chase a fire or a shooting. One night, not long after I'd started work, I found out from the police about a fight between two ambulance attendants at an emergency scene. Some guy had a heart attack at a prominent Atlanta restaurant, and the two ambulances from different companies had gotten there at the same time. As the man lay dying, the ambulance drivers fought over who would take him to the hospital to be treated. Unlike in most jurisdictions where ambulance services are city-run, Atlanta used privately owned firms, which charge emergency victims for transporting them to the hospitals. Normally, when the emergency calls come in, county dispatchers rotated them so as to spread the business evenly among the various ambulance services. But some greedy firms monitor police scanners for emergency calls, then tried to beat their competitors to the scene to collect the victims and their money. It was known as call jumping. I wrote a story about the incident involving a heart attack victim. Afterwards, I looked into the problem of, stop doing it, call jumping. It proved to be a reporter's dream. Police have reported several disturbing incidents, including one which an ambulance driver racing to jump a call had run a red light and crashed into a car, killing the motorist, who happened to be a college honor roll student. I did a series of front page stories that led the county officials to investigate the problem and overhaul the entire system of dispatching calls to ambulance services. After getting a lot of praise from editors, I made a pitch to cover a beat. It turned out to be the only beat available was covering the Atlanta police. Eager to get on day shift, I took it. When I first went down to the police station, I wondered if I made a major mistake. I still didn't like cops. I hated their arrogant manner, the way they dressed, with keys dangling on their sides, and the way they walked with their arms hanging wide like cowboys preparing to draw. They always seemed to have an attitude, like they were itching to walk up and spew their favorite macho lines to provoke anger. All right, move along, buddy. At first, I confined myself to an office at headquarters, where the rollers left copies of police reports for journalists to sift through. Generally, I leafed through the reports and got the story ideas from keeping my distance from the fuzz. Cops being cops, they were wary of me too, and many were uncooperative when I called or went to their offices for interviews. Then I met Detective Davies, and all that changed. While I was walking through the headquarters one day, he sidled up next to me and said, "Yo, Bleed, what is it?" Dressed in leather jacket and slick, dark sunshades, he didn't look like a cop. He looked more like some brother I'd seen at a basketball court somewhere. Taken back, I asked him who he was. He told me he was an undercover cop who worked the streets. I hadn't known there were cops as cool as him. He was unconventional, pure street. He talked more trash than a little bit and walked with a hard bop that would put pimpers to shame. Every time I saw him, he slapped me the hard five and say, "Yo, Bleed." We hit it off and start from the start and hung out sometimes. He showed me the seedy parts of the city, turned me on to some good story tips. I often wondered when riding through the city with Davies what the fellas would think if they could see me cruising through town in the front seat with a lawman. Davies introduced me to other cops, and I gradually loosened up around them. For the first time, I began to understand why a lot of cops have bad attitudes. Day in and day out, they deal with the worst of the human spectrum, and they are despised by a good number of people they serve, right? Listen, that also jades their view of people because they always deal with the worst of society, so they think the worst of people. It both amused and amazed me that I was covering cops. I walked around headquarters carrying my own little secret. None of them suspected I was once their mortal enemy. I often wondered what they would do if they knew my background, and that I had once detested them and their kind so much that I'd fantasized about taking pop shots at them, guerrilla style. It was hard sometimes to separate myself from the stories I wrote. Robberies, rapes, murders, drugs. I saw shades of my old life in all of that. And some stories got to me. Like the time I beat the police to a crime scene only to find a dead cab driver slouched in his car with a bullet hole in his head. I stood there for a long time staring at that hole, thinking about the time I shot Plaz and the times I've been shot at. I felt blessed to be alive and living clean. Another time, I went to where a car had burst into flames on the interstate. When I walked up to the car, I saw a young boy sitting in the back seat, burned to a crisp. On the floor beneath him was a lone sneaker, about the size of one Monroe would have wore. The image of that boy has never left me. Nowadays, when people ask me how I'm doing, I flash the pained smile and say fine. I'm doing just fine. I don't think I'm a convincing liar, but I think people believe me because by my outer appearance, I should be doing fine. I have just started on a new job at one of the nation's top-rated newspapers. I had just moved to what is commonly considered the best place for blacks to live in America. I should be feeling great, but I'm not. Within me rages a turbulence that can hardly contain. The source of my anxiety is life yet unborn, a soul that has not breathed a single breath of his polluted air, and when it enters this world, will probably know a time when it wishes it had never seen the light of day. That probably seems terrible view for an expectant father to hold. Perhaps if I had planned on having a child, I would not be so depressed. It was a decision made by the mother and executed with my naive cooperation. Now I found myself faced with unpleasant decisions of what to do, whether to remain in the household or move into my own place. The decision has not so much to do with her. It is the child that I'm concerned about. A child that didn't ask to come into this chaotic, unhappy world. With one child already in California, thousands of miles away, how can I bring myself to separate from another? I'm afraid that if I do, I will end up supporting the myth of the black stud who travels from household to household, fathering children and then deserting them. And if I stay, that too would be a compromise that I cannot live with. I cannot reconcile myself to live in a household for the sake of the children or anyone else. It is a dilemma, indeed, one which there are no easy answers. I will have to resolve it intelligently, rationally, and soon. Early 1983. Work was going well, but it was just the opposite at home with Debbie. We seemed to get in a new argument every day. Before we left Tidewater, she had assured me that her former job would cover prenatal and birth expenses. Shortly after we got to Atlanta, she checked again and learned that it wasn't true. Also, she promised to find work until the baby was born. After we got to Atlanta, she rarely left the apartment to look for a job. Boy, trust. She had no money to help with living expenses. She didn't even have a bank account. She said her former fiance messed up her finances so badly that she thought it'd be best that she dealt in cash. My savings dwindled, and more, my attitude soured. Yeah, she had a very different vision of how family looked, and he was not. Really making good choices with he was not selective with his seed. He was just dropping it in there. I generally know how I feel about most things, but I was more ambivalent about the situation than about any in my life. Even as I was moving forward with plans for the baby arrival, I felt torn. There was a part of me that wanted to accept the situation and make the best of it. You make your bed hard, you gotta still lie in it. And there was another part of me that hated it because I felt I was being manipulated. And you are. Two things can be truth at the same time. It just didn't feel right. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel at all. All I knew was that it felt different than when I got Liz pregnant. The difference was that I cared deeply about Liz and trusted her. Although I wasn't prepared for fatherhood when she got pregnant, there was at least an emotional connection with Liz that I could lock into. I liked Debbie, but beyond that, there was nothing compelling about the relationship. And I felt guilty sometimes about feeling that way. You shouldn't have just been giving your body up. But Debbie acted like she was happy. Yeah, she getting exactly what she wanted. She getting the baby. If you don't know, Debbie had issues. Her fiance used this. She'd been pregnant before. So to her, this is like a dream come true. You know what I mean? But in her, she's living on the plans and the ideas that she's had for her life and not necessarily what would be best for the little family that they are creating. And he's being a jerk. She and her friends had a baby shower at the apartment. She constantly went shopping and came back with baby clothes, a crib, diaper, and other baby stuff. And she signed us up for Lamar's class. Reluctantly, I went. Sitting around in a circle with about 8 white, happy-faced couples, I felt strange and out of place. They were married and I was single. They seemed happy and excited, and I was scared and depressed. They looked like they were in love, and I was nowhere near it. During breaks, the women would gather in tight circles and chattered, comparing experiences and talking about shit like whether they were going to have a C-section and whether they planned to breastfeed. The men talked about health plans, hospitalization, and stuff. I hated it when the instructor called Debbie and me once to come inside the little hunky-dory circle and demonstrate a point she was trying to make about the partner's coaching role in helping ensure that the mother breathed properly. I felt like I was living a lie and that anybody who looked into my eyes could see it. I went to the Lamaze class once or twice and then decided it was too strenuous pretending to be half happy, half of a happy expectant couple. That wasn't the case, so why pretend? He can be very selfish. He childish. One day when Debbie was getting dressed for another class, I told her, I don't want to do this. She got pissed off and shouted her favorite complaint. You're selfish. All you think about is what you want to do. I said, what's wrong with me wanting what I want? You got a family, dog. That's what's wrong with it. We went back and forth repeating the same gripes that we'd shared before. That's how the arguments usually went. At times, Debbie seemed not to care a whole lot about whether I shared her enthusiasm about having a child. Her unbridled excitement, she ain't even paying attention to that man, really. Her unbridled excitement sometimes bothered me. It was the part what made me suspicious of her. I thought she had just adjusted to the pregnancy much too quickly and eagerly for it to have been a mistake. I didn't want to think about that about Debbie because she was such a nice person and seemed so genuine most of the time. But I couldn't help thinking sometimes that my pocket was being picked. It was, bro. I rebelled against her because of all of that. Sometimes on my days off, I'd leave the house and without telling Debbie where I was going, take long drives and think about my predicament. I'd ride around the perimeter of the city or go and hang out with one of my homeboys. I stayed in touch with an old girlfriend from Tidewater and rendezvoused with her a few times at a North Carolina hotel at the midway point. I'd return the next day and find Debbie red-eyed and distraught from crying all night. I didn't want to be mean to her, but I couldn't stand surrendering the control over my life that I had only recently learned to command. Debbie's family also played a big role in the discomfort I felt. They were real close. It was one of those families that if you get into an argument with one of them, all of them would jump in. On the one hand, I admired that closeness, but on the other, I thought it was dangerous. It is. And there's usually some underlying issues going on too. They had this blind mutual loyalty that led them to fiercely stand by each other, right or wrong. I feared that Debbie wanted to use me to produce a carbon copy of the family she'd grown up in. She did. Her mother was a housewife, that's why she ain't want to work, who adored family and children, and she was kind of domineering. She worked especially hard to see to it that the family matters worked out like she thought they should. Debbie's mother and two sisters were always on the phone with her, discussing preparations for the baby. I always got the feeling that they were the major players in this thing and that I was a secondary player. You are. But you also acting like a secondary player. You ain't standing up for yourself. You're not setting any kind of boundaries. You're not saying anything except focusing on your depression and your feelings, right? So she's right. You being selfish. But she only point that out because she being selfish too. I suspected that both Debbie and her mother wanted me to be like Debbie's father, who was strong, silent type. A construction subcontractor, he worked hard, brought home his pay, and kept his mouth shut. He was a nice man, intelligent, as gentle as could be. He didn't like conflict, didn't like to raise his voice. He was a go along to get along kind of guy. Watching him during the visit to our place in Atlanta, I understood where Debbie got her ideas about what a man should be. Seeing how she and her mother handled him, I understood why they came at me the way they did. Everybody has a price. I figured Debbie's father was the reason they got HBO. This nigga not stupid, so this fool can just sit there and watch TV. I know that's right. At their house in Norfolk, the mother and daughters would send him to the den, give him remote control, and let him watch TV while they sat in the living room and made important decisions, which is funny. Her family had, and which is funny. Her family was such a strong presence in my affairs that I felt like I was being double banked all the time. They seemed intent in molding me into their groove. No one came out and said it, but I got the impression that they thought my resistance was just temporary jitters. I'm sure they figured it's gonna wear you down, and at some point you're gonna get into it, or they're gonna say you ain't no good man, and they're gonna leave you. That eventually I'd break down and get with the program. I got a good sense of what kind of family I was dealing with when Debbie's mother asked me on the phone one day, "What are you all gonna name the baby, Nathan?" Jokingly, I said, "If it's a boy, we'll probably name him Hakeem or Muhammad." Before I could say just kidding, she exploded. It don't make no sense to name that child no African shit. I went off. How you gonna get mad at me for what I want to name my child? Exactly. It was clear to me that she expected us to give the child some acceptable European name. It has always amazed me how some black people are so brainwashed they'd fight to preserve a life and culture detrimental to their own mental health. You hear? That's why some of us are named the way we are. I know that's exactly why my name is Anthony. Which is funny, because my mama still swears she wanted to name me Malik. Over 3 centuries ago, white folk took away our names and assigned us theirs. And we've continued that confusing practice ever since. That's why I applauded when young black girls started giving their baby crazy made-up names like Tamika, LaWanda, Laquita. Them shit is not made up no more. Tamika's not either. They may sound funny, but at least they're original. They're not slave identities. When Debbie's mother and I clashed over the naming of the baby, I knew I was in for a bitter power struggle with her family that wouldn't go away easy. Oh shoot, time is rolling. Yeah. What we doing, family? All right. Time is reeling. Let me get that up out of here. Man, give me that shit out there. I don't want to reply. I want to delete. Alright, we worry about that later. I was at work on May 6, 1983 when Debbie went into labor. By the time I got to Grady Memorial Hospital, she had already delivered the baby. Debbie had insisted on giving the baby a name she said she'd picked out long ago. Ian. I believe it's Scottish. When she named him, I thought, who ever seen a black Scot? There's plenty of black Scots. You don't travel enough. In a compromise, I gave him his middle name, Bakari, a Swahili name meaning of noble promise. I am Bakari McCall. I went to see Debbie briefly after the delivery, then went to the infant ward to see my son. Standing there, I felt the same sense of loneliness that I felt a decade earlier when Monroe was born. I stood there and I looked at Ian for a long time. Bald-headed and shriveled, he looked old. He lay there helpless and no doubt alarmed. Watching him, I thought about the implications of bringing another black male into a world to be dogged by white folks. I knew that there was no way Debbie could foresee what I saw in store for Ian. She saw only the joys of motherhood, baby food, and nursery rhymes. I saw pain, job rejections, and racial slights, self doubt, and maybe even self hate. At one point, he squirmed and started crying. My heart sank. I wanted to cry too, as much for myself as for him. Chapter 33, Blending. In many ways, adapting to the white mainstream was a lot like learning to survive in prison. You had to go in and check out the lay of the land. You had to identify the vipers and the cutthroats and play the game by the rules that were alien to nature and foreign to any civilized society. Prison primed me just right for that challenge. Still, I was a little intimidated when I first arrived at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It was certainly a step up in size and prominence from the Virginia Pilot Ledger. It had a higher circulation and a much larger staff too. The newsroom was one massive open space filled with typewriters, computers, and rows of desks manned by eager reporters. Editors sat at broad desks in the center of the rooms, conferring with reporters and reading stories. It was the first time I had regularly been around that many whites before. Everybody looked like they knew what they were doing. I thought, this is a big paper. These are experienced journalists. Maybe I'm not in their league. But learning the job was easy. The hard part was figuring out the newsroom culture and learning to interpret and respond to all those whites. Clearly, we were different from different worlds. I found that the cues of one behavior that can be interpreted a certain way in one culture can have an entirely different meaning or no meaning at all in another. Like something as simple as speaking when you pass each other in the hallways. In black neighborhoods, we make a big deal out of it if you pass somebody and don't say hello. It's offensive. Folks get mad and talk about your ass. In the newsroom, whites would speak to me one day, then I'd see him the next day and say hello, and they'd look at me like I was from Planet Z. Or they'd speak to me in the office, and then when they saw me approaching them on the street, they'd look toward the walls or twist their heads halfway around their necks like the girl in The Exorcist to avoid eye contact. That confused the hell out of me. I think, what does that mean? Are they pissed off about something I said or did? Over time, I learned that that's just the way many white folks are. It's no big deal to them whether or not you speak. That is false. And then there was the black male thing. I knew going into that newsroom that there was an additional pressure on brothers, but I didn't know it was that intense, especially from white men. I always caught them looking at us. I mean, studying us from head to toe, checking out our demeanor, the clothes we wore, our shoes, and how we coordinated our colors. Some of the brothers dressed nicely in outfits that were appropriate yet stylish. Occasionally, one of the white guys would make a snide comment about the way we dressed, as if to suggest that somehow lacked substance because we paid attention to our appearance. They say things like, I bet you spend a lot of money on clothes, don't you? Don't get mad because you can't dress. No, I don't. I knew what that was about. It was one of the many ways they revealed their jealousy. A lot of the white boys came to work looking frumpy. They ran polka dots and stripes in all directions, and their colors were so mismatched that it looked like they got dressed in the dark. They couldn't dress as sharp as the brothers, and they felt insecure about it, so they tried to put us down. It was petty, but it was real microaggressions. It was also shocking to see how insanely insecure some of those white guys were in the men's room. Standing next to a white dude in the urinal one day, I noticed him looking down at my penis. The first time it happened, I thought it was just my imagination. Then after I began to pay closer attention, I noticed that it happened often with a lot of different white guys in the men's room. They just had to look and see if the myths about black men's penis size were true. Sometimes I was in the mood and I'd fuck their heads up and stand back from a urinal or food inches so they can get a good look. You stupid. You out here trying to show your meat off to another man to make him jealous. And you really convinced yourself how that's a good idea. You be like, yeah, let me let these men look at my meat. and that's supposed to be it. What did you talk about, bro? Hey, man. Oh, no, that's old. That's 3 months ago. Okay, cool. I'm like, Liberty and timed you out. That sucks. That's crazy. You out here really trying to make it seem like showing your meat off is a good choice. There were all sorts of alliances and political intrigues that made up the zany culture of a newsroom. I arrived there just as the morning and evening papers had merged. New leaders were named and some heads rolled. There were the allies of the old regime who were now on shaky ground. There were the allies of the new regime whose careers were on the upswing. There were the white feminists vying for power, and there were the black, as usual, outsiders trying to blend in and deal with the mist of all the aforementioned shit. Okay. There were a lot more blacks at the Atlanta paper than had been in Norfolk. And these Atlanta blacks were different from most blacks I'd spent any real time around. Many had come from staunchly middle class backgrounds and were second generation college graduates. They were stone cold assimilationists, facts, who had done everything the white man said you need to do to blend in and get ahead. They'd gone to the nation's most prominent colleges and universities and learned all the things about white folks that you need to know to be considered intelligent by them. They were well trained but poorly educated. They could talk about Hemingway or tell you everything Shakespeare ever doodled on paper, but if you ask them about Gibran, J. Rogers, or Akbar, they shrug and be like, who are they? They were the most pitiful ones, the ones who surrendered so completely to white domination that they were alien to themselves. Racism was so painful for them that they denied its existence. They would be the first to tell you, there's no real racism anymore. Bullshit. We have to stop making excuses for our own shortcomings. If they overheard you talking about white folks, they would be the first to come to white's defense. You sound angry. The suggestion was that somehow, if you had allowed racism to make you mad, then you were defeated. I felt the opposite. I felt that any black person who had no anger was defeated. Facts. Many of the blacks had gone beyond undergraduate school and gotten master's degree. They talked white and they thought white and they even dressed goofy like the white man. Blue sports coat, high water khakis, and penny loafers. Away from the office, it was crew neck sweaters, high water khakis, and deck shoes. They boasted of vacations in Europe where white people go. One dude, a brother, who had worked in the sports department, even went out of it and bought a pickup truck so that he belonged. I knew he wasn't hauling anything. I think he wanted to feel part of the good old boy culture. Those white dudes in those sport departments who drove pickups too. It was sickening to see how much white folks had scrambled their brains. I often thought about how out of place some of those white acting black cats would look walking through Cavalier Manor. They'd get eaten alive. If the serious Jonas hone in on them, they get ripped apart. From their patty boy shoes and tight butt walks to their bald faces. Child, you ain't got no mustache. Where your stash at? If you never see that joke, you definitely gotta look up that joke. Oh man, I forget his name. Dion Cole. Where your stash at? He called it the grape face. If you don't have no mustache, no facial hair, you like, man, you look like you about to go touch people. Blacks weren't immune to the neurosis of that characterized the newsroom either. They seemed uptight, nervous, just like everybody else. Cordial, but cautious. Some of them seemed reluctant to speak to me when I first got there. They seemed hesitant to openly acknowledge the presence of another black. I've been there. They be like, I can't act like there's no black people in here. It was as if they didn't want whites to know that it made a difference to them that another black had come, and it does. The truth of the matter was that it made a big difference. In journalism, there were so few African Americans in newsrooms. We're always delighted to see another black face. It's the same thing that happens with white people when they find themselves amid a sea of black people at a subway station or somewhere. When the subway takes them someplace where there are more whites, they're thrilled. Although the AJC had a share of handkerchief heads, what? Handkerchief heads. Many of the blacks were cool and down to earth. We got together sometimes for dinner and drinks and even an occasional party. It felt good being in a work environment where there were at least some people on my job I could relate to. Even for those of us who didn't relate well personally, we were drawn together by a common bond. We were in the white folks' territory, and like it or not, we needed each other to survive. All right, fuck it. It's my Thursday. Thursday is my Friday. I'll read another section, family, before we move on. I knew from the get-go what white folks thought of us. I knew they were afraid of us. That if I expected to do okay, I had to be decidedly unaggressive and unthreatening. Yet, I kept hearing my manager say, we want people to be aggressive. That's the kind of double message that make brothers crazy. If we're aggressive on the job, white folks get intimidated. If we're unaggressive, they knock us for being passive, and we don't advance. I got my first lesson about restraint in the newsroom from a brother. I completed the story and turned it in. Then a white editor made a lot of changes without discussing them with me. I got hot and went back and changed the story to its original form. When the black editor found out about it, he pulled me to the side and talked to me. Hey man, be cool. You can't lose your cool like that. But white reporters lost their cool all the time. Some white reporters, especially those considered stars and golden boys, went off on editors in front of everybody, and it was routinely dismissed as mere temperament. But I couldn't get away with those temperament. I'm a brother. Facts. I couldn't either. I always had to. They hated me. Because I ain't toned myself down. I'm done turned down my black. I'm not acting. I'm not going to be African American because that makes you feel comfortable. I'm going to be black. And I definitely pay high cost for that, but I get it. But white reporters, the double standard reminded me of the days when my brothers and I were very young and my mother warned us not to act like N-words. When we went into public spaces, the white kids acted like N-words all they wanted. But when we got rowdy, somehow it was a crime. Such double standards on the job worked a serious head trip on me, making me second guess the sort of instinctive judgment that had guided me all my life. There were times after the story changing incident with the editor when I should have been aggressive and I wasn't. Once, while I was working on the night shift, an editor in his early 50s called me to his office. As I walked forward, he said, "Will you hurry your ass up?" I was nearly floored. Walking towards him, I asked myself, did he really say that? Maybe I didn't hear him right. I couldn't have heard him right. No way. If he did say that, then what does he mean? What should I do? Should I straighten his monkey ass here and now or report it to the higher ups tomorrow? Maybe I'm being super sensitive. I told him don't talk to me like that. No, don't talk to me like that. I ain't your motherfucking kid. Excuse me. And he probably would have lost his job in 2 weeks or so. Because they don't like to be called out on their ignorance. I second guessed myself so much that I ended up doing the worst thing possible. Nothing. That is. Deep down, I knew I heard him right. Every time I saw that editor after that, I thought about how he disrespected me and I regretted not putting him in check. If he'd said something like that to me on the streets, I'd have put my foot so far up his ass, he would have tasted shoe polish. But we were on his turf. He knew it. And he knew it. I knew it. I had to be cool and let it slide. If I had straightened him out, All he would have needed to do was casually suggest to some management person that I had a chip on my shoulder, what they love to say, and it would be goodbye, Nathan McCall. They might not have fired me outright, but they would have started nitpicking and fucking with me, working on getting me out of there. That's the cold phrase they use when they want to get rid of black men. They say we have a chip on their shoulder. They still say that. They know they can get a response then, because no white person wants to run across a black man with a chip on his shoulder. They will lie. They will lie. They get images of Nat Turner, slave rebellions, throat slashing and shit. And they ate Nat Turner. Ate him. Cut him up in pieces. Ate his brains. Interesting. Interesting. White men can throw tantrums in the workplace all day and night, and they're excused as eccentric. But the second a brother shows some aggression, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got to go. And that's one of the reasons I got into leadership. Because at some part, it was too hard for me it was just hard for them to get rid of me. And then when I got into leadership, I made sure I got people on the board who understood cultural differences. So when they got upset and they be like, maybe he has a chip on his shoulder. I remember my board hated me during the COVID because I wouldn't open up the schools. And they kept on saying, well, my kids is going back to school. And I said, well, our kids live in a healthcare desert. So even if our kids get sick, they don't have nowhere to go. They live in a food desert, a healthcare desert. They don't have nowhere to go. So I'm not taking these chances. Just because your school will. They hated me. It was funny. And I remember one person on my board was like, they trying to get rid of you. They got so mad at me that they couldn't get rid of me that they just closed the school down altogether. Which is funny. Do you know how mad you have to be? The amount of times they try to say I was difficult to deal with. No, I'm just not doing what you're saying. You're not even in education. You don't even know if that makes sense. You just basing it on your feelings. You don't even know. So it was crazy. They definitely would have did that. Oh, man, where you going? Turning pages? Hey, man. What's going on with my technology? Stop. Hey, man, I think maybe this means it's time for us to stop. Stop, man. What are you doing? Something. Oh, wait a minute. God darn, you playing. Listen, it might be time to stop because my Jones is starting to turn pages and I ain't even touching it. I'm gonna find where we at. Doo. Handkerchief heads. I know we did that. We talked about handkerchief heads. And he jumped out. And we straightened him out. I had a hard time interpreting white folks' behaviors in a lot of situations. Sometimes I try to make sense out of the behavior for which there was no rational explanation, like the actions of Brenda Mooney, the city editor who ran the day-to-day affairs of the news reporting. She was an insecure white woman trying to rise in the ranks by proving to white men that she can be just as oppressive as them. Which is funny, because that's exactly what they'll do. Try to be just as oppressive. It's funny. She even wore the women's version of the blue and gray wool power suits, which looked like they'd been stretched on her big torso. She acted strange sometimes and would have you scratching your head, wondering if you really saw and heard what you thought you saw and heard. Whenever I talked to her about news stories, I felt her eyes raking my body, not in a sexual way, but in a deeply curious way. Invariably, she would focus on my tie, half listening, then say, okay, and walk off abruptly, leaving me standing there puzzled. Brenda had phobias that seemed to increase by the day, like her fear of elevators. She often come to the sixth floor new room huffing and puffing like she'd been running track. She walked up 6 flights of stairs because she was scared of the machine. She seemed to try to compensate for her insecurities with fanatical devotion to work. A lot of people do that. Although the city editor's job required people skills, she had a terrible way with people, was universally despised in the newsroom. Yet she'd been promoted from reporter to city editor in a few years. At first, watching Brendan Mooney's career rise confounded me. I thought, this woman is crazy. But if she's crazy, then why has she been promoted to work over me and so many other people? Don't make sense. I thought that about my old supervisor. She was administrative assistant and somehow became an executive director. And in the black world, that does not happen. You don't go from administrative assistant and you can be an executive director. They don't even assume. You learn the skills from being an administrative assistant to be an executive director. And you could. You very much could. But that was the first time I had seen. I'm like, man, what was your last job? Administrative assistant. Girl, you playing. I was like, what was my last job? Executive director. That's how I got to be another executive director. I had to be an executive director. Crazy. I looked around and saw other people as nutty, obsessive, and insecure as her, and they were moving up and being promoted too. The people who were self-assured and humane in their dealings with other people went nowhere, but the crazies went straight to the top. It made me scratch my head and question my own perception. Maybe they're not crazy. Maybe that's normal, and I'm the one who's confused. Maybe these people know something I don't. I realized that these people, black or white, who survived the system were those who learned to adjust to it rather than challenge the system's insanities and conform to its rules. I knew I could never adjust fully to the establishment, but I decided that maybe I would adapt easier if I conformed a little more. I thought maybe I take things too personal. Maybe I read too much into things. Maybe a lot of the things that I think are racial are really my imagination. These are fairly nice and intelligent people. None of them has called me a nigger or boy, and that's how they can pretend like racism doesn't exist. Maybe I should just play along with the establishment game and not be so different. I tried for a minute. I walked around there quiet and unassuming and tried to be aggressive as a reporter while being unaggressive when relating to coworkers. I even went out and bought a pair of Bass Weegens, those thick soled penny loafers all the white men wore in the newsroom. I decided that maybe the shoes I wore were too black looking and stylish. Flamboyant, I'll be killing them because I still dress flamboyant. And one of the reasons I do that is because it make all of them look at me. I'll show up to their conference as executive director with a flowery jacket on. I do that flamboyant, so I make them look at me. Look at me. Yup. And then I'm extra black. Extra chocolate. So I do that flamboyant, but it does. I see people make that choice all the time, and even as other black people, they look at me like, man, you got so much courage. I'm like, I don't care what they gonna do. Fire you? And what you gonna do? Get another job. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? I'm not giving up, boy. Sometimes my ego can be too big, and I'm not always a humble person. And in stuff like that, my hotep flare up, and man, I'm not humble at all. No. Now maybe I need to do, but I don't know. That's crazy. I thought that maybe if I wore some padded boy shoes and toned down my dress, white folks would stop staring at me so much and they'd see I'm not so different. A friend who went with me to buy the shoes thought I'd lost my mind. He looked at them and said, "Why are you buying these things?" I got mad and blew my cool. "You don't understand the pressure I feel." I knew there was no way I can explain it either. Anyway, I wore those plenty loafers several times, then gave up. It just didn't work. I knew from the days at Waters Junior High that brothers have to have their pants fall over their shoes a certain way for them to look right. The pants can't be high waters, and the tongue of the shoe can't ride too high. Otherwise, your shoes will push the bottom of your pants leg up and you'll look goofy. White boys must not mind, but no real brother wants to look goofy. When I wore those Ouijans to work, not only did I look goofy, I felt goofy. They didn't feel right when I walked. They didn't let my pant legs fall right. I looked down at my feet, and all I could do was shake my head. I was conscious of those shoes every second that they were on my feet. After wearing them a while, I put the Ouijas in my closet and left them there. They're still there now, right beside my prison brogans, with about half an inch of dust on them. I kept the brogans as a memento of what I've been through in prison. I kept the Ouijans as a testament to the time I almost lost my way in white mainstream. All right, family. That's pretty good. We can do that. Do 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 do. All right. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I gotta work on my Thursday nights, cause I don't be seeing the comments. Okay. That's why I can't use it. Boo doo boo. All right. Well, family, this is my Friday, so I'm about to get to enjoying my day. I don't. Well, I work from home, period. But Fridays in the summer, we don't work at all. Well, yeah. But I hope to see you Tuesday, where we continue our discussion on we are doing that quantum shift, and we just did rewiring the observer, and I think we are moving on to the observer effect, so we can discuss that a little bit. Um, all in an effort to embody the energy, the thoughts, all those things to make us who we want to be. You know what I mean? Um, if we don't see you here Tuesday, hope to see you back here next Thursday, where we continue reading Makes Me Wanna Holla, which is again one of my favorite books. Again, I hope you have. What is this? Is that a payment due? Oh, never mind. No, that's due. I hope you have a great weekend. And family, I look forward to seeing you again next week. Peace and blessings. Gratitude and thanks. From my soul to yours. Peace.